Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable, a show where we explore, share, and learn about trends in leadership and sales acumen. A place that provides our audience valuable insights, advice, and best practices from trusted members of the sales leadership community. Now, let's welcome KENDLEY Davenport and jdiebold to this episode of the Sales Leader Roundtable.
Hey, happy holidays to you, Jim.
Hey, KENDLEY, happy holidays to you too. We're in between, and it's a short time. I can't wait to get to Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where you can officially say happy holidays for the next couple of days, which is always a fun time of the year, isn't it?
Totally agree. But we have some important work to do still.
Absolutely. I was getting ready to say, and we have about 2.5 weeks to try to crank stuff out for everybody out there trying to make the year-end sales targets and stuff. Hopefully this will be a good time for everybody.
That's right. Absolutely.
Hey, Jim, as always, I want to take a few minutes to introduce what we're all about, and then we can jump into our guest this month. Is that all right with you?
100%.
Well, great. Well, welcome everybody to the Sales Leader Roundtable's TV and radio broadcast. We're love to be in this great partnership with USA Global TV and Radio, who've allowed us to have this great time slot on the first Monday of every month. And we really appreciate Dr. J and her team for helping us deliver this great content to our audience. But I want to just take a quick second for all of our audiences, tell them a little bit about what the Sales Leader Roundtable is all about in case this is your first visit. You know, our show will explore topics in leadership and sales acumen from some of the leading thought leaders in our space. Our goal is to bring you actionable and practical information that allows you to immediately grow your teams or your leadership skill set. I want to also welcome and thank all of my LinkedIn followers who might be tuning in today. I know I have quite a few people that do that and comment on our show throughout this broadcast and then some of our promotions, both post and pre-show. But Jim, why don't we get back together here and see about getting this guest? I'm so excited who we're going to have with us this month.
Yeah, KENDLEY, I'm excited as well. I got to meet our guest a few months back, and I came to you immediately and said we got to see if we can coordinate schedules and get them on. So I get the opportunity to introduce our guest, who's Michael TRACY. He is an entrepreneur, trainer, and speaker, and he has started businesses in marketing, legal technology, software, and professional training. Michael has been teaching time-tested strategies and techniques for over 18 years. First as a sales manager and trainer, then as a business owner and executive, and now as the founder of Sales Journey, which is a business growth education company. He has recruited, trained, managed, and motivated several sales forces that have achieved many millions in sales results, including a team that surpassed 5,000 members. Michael is the co-author of the worldwide best-selling book, Unlimited Sales Success, which is now offered in 12 different languages, and he also holds 3 issued patents from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for inventions in software technology. So I'm super excited to bring on board Michael TRACY.
Oh, thank you, Jim. That's a wonderful intro. I think that's the long one. So I appreciate you getting through all that. Well, and thank you, KENDLEY, for having me. This is really awesome.
Well, we're so glad to have you, Michael. We're pretty excited about what we're going to talk about today. I mean, future-proofing strategy and tactics. I mean, this is a good time to talk about it because most everybody's probably either built a plan for 2024 or building a plan for 2024. Something's in the works. So this is a good chance for them to pressure test what they've already done or make sure what they're building has all the key elements that you're going to talk about today.
I agree completely. Now let's jump into it.
And not only that, but the title insinuates that the magic 8 ball will work because it's going to future-proof those plans. So, Michael, you have this long history of different things that we read off in your bio. So kind of give us a little more context. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I got started in sales probably over 20 years ago. I went to college, I graduated, and I was going to go into finance. Maybe wealth management. And then I spoke to some mentors and my father, and I asked, what do you think I should do? And the feedback I got was get into sales. And then they said, get into direct sales. I'm like, well, what is direct sales? And they said, well, it's where you get, belly to belly, eye to eye, and face to face with as many people as possible. And I recoiled at that idea because I didn't really want to do that. But then, I realized that, if I wanted to progress and become kind of a self-actualized human being, I should listen to the older and wiser people around me. And so I took a job as a door-to-door salesperson. And I think in the first year of my career as a door-to-door salesperson, I knocked on maybe 10,000 doors and I got rejected almost 10,000 times. But I did get promoted. I made some sales and they promoted me to sales manager. And when I started recruiting people to train and mentor and, sometimes babysit, out in the field, one of the big reasons why I went into sales, and now I have my own sales training business, was because of this transformative process that I witnessed multiple times. So, you take somebody who's working a minimum wage job or has no job at all. And back then it was, $200 a week. And after maybe 3 or 4 weeks of sales training, if they didn't quit, most would quit after a couple of weeks. But if they stuck it out for maybe 4 to 6 weeks, they'd start making some sales and they would go from making $200 a week to $200 a day. And for a lot of people, having that sort of affirmative reaction, having the market say you're worth the very minimum, and then in 4 to 6 weeks, having the market change their mind and say, hey, you're actually worth 500, 600% more than you thought you were. Watching that transformation, they started walking differently. They started dressing differently. Some of these young men and women started making more money than their parents. And their whole future, their whole future perspective became, expanded. And they just became different people. And so I've seen that transition happen multiple times. And now I make a living doing it. So that's just kind of a brief background. It's kind of like my why. I like to answer my what the motive is, straight away, kind of like a homicide investigator. the first thing they ask is, well, why is he here and why does he do what he does? And so that's my why.
Well, Michael, I love that. When it's funny you say you were told to go into sales. I have a few folks on in the family where I was doing the same thing when I was in college, trying to figure out what the next steps were after the degree. And one uncle in particular said, you got to go into sales. Yeah. I should have asked better questions, but I got into sales, and well, here we are today all together because we all did similar things. We got into sales.
I was getting ready to say, Jim, I love, Michael, that you talked about your why in that process, because I think me and Jim share with you a similar feeling, because we too have seen lots of individuals and teams become transformative, right? They figure out they can do a lot more than they thought they could do. And that's sort of what sales is about, is figuring out how to be exponential in your impact on things and on processes. And it's what drives, I think, both me and Jim as well, is that when you first get into sales, it's sort of about money at first. How much, you made the comment, you start making more than your parents, or you, instead of 200 a week, it's 200 a day. But I think for me and Jim, and probably for you now, it's sort of about seeing other people develop and grow is more of the satisfaction than it is about the money.
Well, yeah,
money's good, right? No matter, we like good money, but
I call it's the people development business. It's sales is like just such a wonderful, almost Trojan horse to personal and professional development, because you have to go in there, you have to have a certain level of grit to withstand the amount of rejection that you get, especially early on. But once you come out of that process, and you've experienced a couple thousand rejections, you kind of develop a mental callus, I think, that allows you to do so many other things without fear of judgment or failure or the fear of rejection. And so I think that's a huge win if you can stick it out in that first kind of session of sales.
Couldn't agree with you more, and It makes me want to go to another question, but it's a question that me and Jim have often debated with other guests, and me and him countless hours off screen debating what's been happening in the sales world, particularly pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID, and how things have changed. So maybe talk to us a little bit how you think the evolution of the sales profession is going. What's in your mind about how this whole game of salesmanship is changing?
Yeah, well, so I think pre-COVID, if you could get an in-person meeting, that was your gold standard, right? You'd hop on an airplane, you'd show up in person. And I think what COVID did, which is, I think is wonderful, really, is it normalized, virtual meetings. So now you can, meet virtually. It's way more acceptable to suggest a virtual meeting. Sometimes it's way more productive because you can have way more meetings than you could previously if you were flying around and bouncing around. And now we're in post-COVID, and so it's a wonderful combination. I think you get to have some preliminary meetings, your discovery sessions, a needs analysis session. You get to talk to multiple stakeholders, and then once you're almost at the finish line, that's when you can show up in person, shake hands and really close the sale or solidify the deal. So I think we've kind of ended up in this post-COVID session with the best of both worlds.
I definitely agree that efficiency, these types of virtual opportunities has created quite a bit of what I call sales efficiency. But, I'd like to get your take on the you talked about that face-to-face meeting, the gold standard prior to COVID, but now that we're post-COVID, do you think the gold standard is still a little bit of face-to-face? I want to get your take on it because I see lots of folks and organizations I come across who are trying to do 100% of everything virtually. And I would say some with success and many, with very mixed results. So what is your take on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so if we take a step back, there's nothing more important than in any business relationship, regardless of sales, than human relationships, right? So that we're seeing all these advances in technology that make, sales professionals and business owners like more efficient and more effective. But ultimately, what it comes down to is trust. And so, if you can get in person, I would obviously default to that. If it's convenient, if you're close by, if you can drive there, it's a short flight, get there in person, shake their hand, get belly by eye to eye. There's nothing better to develop a relationship than showing up in person. What I found with like bigger sales, if you're in B2B and you're going enterprise sales, it's very rare to actually, have a discovery session, a presentation, and close the sale in the first or second meeting. There's usually multiple steps in the process. There's usually like an RFI, RFP process. There's multiple stakeholders involved. There's due diligence. And so what's wonderful is if there is a longer process like that, you can get through that process a lot faster virtually. But when it comes to actually, sealing the deal and getting the commitment, you definitely want to show up in person because now, once the sale's closed, that's when all the work begins. So I think you're right. I mean, if you can get face to face, if you can get person to person, that's your best possible bet. But virtual, now that it's been more normalized, is a wonderful way to make you more efficient and more productive with your time.
Yeah, I certainly believe it's a strong blend going forward. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would say at this point, we've certainly got much better at it. I can recall in 2020 where I was like, well, gosh, I don't have to go anywhere. And no one's going to talk more than they're supposed to in the scheduled meeting time. So I'll just book meetings like back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
I found out that was not a great idea. Because not only did meetings go long, but I was exhausted at the end of the day.
Totally exhausting. But see, with something like Zoom, right, you can plug in all these cool things that make it easier. So like, for example, otter.ai will transcribe the entire meeting right into text and then provide an automated email summary that you can then quickly edit and send off. And so if you've done like a lot of sales before, you know that you want to summarize the meeting, you want to summarize the key action points, the next steps. Having tools like that to help automate it are great. In person, it's a little bit more difficult to have those kind of technology enhancements, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So, Michael, let's take a little dive into your content and what you've kind of gleaned in all of your experience. Tell us a little bit more about insight selling.
So we have to take a few steps back there.
Okay.
I'll give you just a brief history of where I see sales, where sales professionals have been and where it's going. So if we go back to 1985, you have kind of the heyday of transactional selling, right? So back then, the two main tools were the phone and the fax machine. If you were a business owner or a sales professional and somebody had a question about your product or service, they were calling you, right? And they were saying, hey, does it come in blue? Can you deliver it on Thursday? And as a sales professional, what could you do then, right? You could say, yes, it does come in blue, but we only have one more left. What's your credit card number? Or, yeah, we can deliver it on Thursday, but only if you order today. What's your credit card number, right? This is like the ABC, right? You could always be closing, always be closing. And then flash forward, 1995 happens. The internet gets invented. It democratizes information, makes all information available to pretty much everyone for free. So if people have questions, they're no longer calling businesses, right? They are searching for it, right? And it was Ask Jeeves or CompuServe or AOL. We all know that Google won the search engine wars, and they became the recipient of buying intent, right? So now if you had a question, you're going to Google, you were searching it, and Google literally now sells that intent, that buying intent, to the highest bidder in the form of their, AdWords. And so now we're in 2023, right? If people pretty much know what their problems are, they can self-diagnose. There's enormous amounts of content on YouTube. They can search for it. Now we have chat, GPT, and AI that just enhances that ability. So really what they're doing is now they're going to search because they know what their problem is, and they get, 575 different potential solutions, and they do what we all do is kind of search through and compare, and we look at Gantt charts and price comparisons and feature comparisons and read reviews. And the end result of that is most people just don't make a decision, right? It's too much information. Yep. Analysis paralysis. And so insight selling comes in here. This is where you really, as a sales professional, have to position yourself as an expert, which means you have to do some more work on your industry in your research, more long form reading. You have to become a resource for your prospects. So when they come to you, when you finally get into that sales process, you stop, and instead of asking them a bunch of discovery questions, you can say, by the way, did you know what makes our company different from all the others? Because the prospect is entering into the sales process much later in the cycle. They're entering usually towards the end of their process, not in the beginning at the discovery stage. Discovery has largely been done already. And so you need to elevate their understanding through insight. So you teach them something, you empower them with this new level of understanding, which then emboldens them to choose you, to make a purchase, or at least go back and convince all the other stakeholders by teaching the insights that you taught them. So you're kind of evangelizing a group of people back at the company to choose your company. And once you've done that, if you positioned yourself as an expert, you're seen as invaluable, right? You're seen as part of your product, and people will usually choose the person that's elevated their understanding or educated them over somebody that seems less informed. Sorry, that's like the very long answer to the question. I'm sorry.
No, that's a great answer. And someone had shared something similar with me, specifically in a question format of learn the industry, right? So become an expert like you were just sharing, but ask them a question regarding a challenge that like 90+% of the time your ideal client has. Like, hey, how do you deal with this challenge? Which demonstrates what's going on, and then they can tell you what's happening or not happened, which gives you more ammunition as the sales guy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's something I teach, which is the curse of knowledge, right? So it's one of the mistakes we've all made, I think, where you go in and you start communicating at your level of understanding, and you haven't asked the right questions first. So, they pretend if you engage somebody and you're talking over their head, they very rarely will stop you and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. They'll really try to understand. And so asking those initial questions just to gauge what level of understanding they currently possess will give you the ability of saying, okay, well, here you are. Let's take you to the next step. Let me go back to this insight first before we get into the more advanced, professional knowledge.
It's funny you say this. I sum all that up. I have a follow-up clarifying question before Jim gets to the next question for you. When you talked about insight, I think of it as thought leadership, but I think it's also tied. But I think that word insight is extremely important. And I'm going to tell you right now, Michael, I'm going to steal two things that you said, and I'm going to start using myself. And that was elevate their understanding and empower them. Right. And I just thought that was a really good way of saying what insight and what thought leadership is about. But my real question is, one of the things I think creates that aura of being a subject matter expert, as you were commenting in your industry that you're serving, is how you ask questions. If you can ask the type of insightful questions to your audience, to your targeted ideal target, it really makes them go a little bit about, wow, I wish I would have thought of it that way, or that's a different perspective that interests me, right? It all of a sudden it's just not going, what keeps you up at night? Because I really get upset with that question, because if you don't know, why are we talking?
Yeah.
And so I want them to tell me what's keeping me up at night, or how they're seeing others be kept up at night, and how it could affect me if I don't have it buttoned up. But what's your thought on how to tie the questioning to the insight?
Well, I think if you have the opportunity, so what they say is, they've done some studies on this too. 20 minutes of uninterrupted listening builds more positive rapport and trust than any amount of talking, right? So if you have the opportunity to ask good questions and just listen, and especially actively listen, write down what they're saying, I think that's ultimately the best way to start any meeting, is to just really understand where they are, their level of understanding, what their problems and challenges are. I make a joke that if you were to listen to somebody uninterrupted for an hour, they would likely kind of stand up and give you a hug at the end, because very few people would ever do that. and after 20 minutes, I feel like all the business stuff would have been aired out, and they'd start talking about everything else. So you basically give them some time, and you allow them to speak, and you truly listen. And you're not only validating, their business issues, but they're validating them as a potential, customer. And it goes a long way to develop that relationship. I think one of the funny little stats is that the human brain can process 500 words per minute, but the average person speaks 150 words per minute. So, you're talking about having almost 70% of your brain's capacity not in use if you're just listening without actively listening and writing things down and asking clarifying questions. So, yeah, I mean, in summary, I think, listening is the new selling to some extent.
It's funny you say that, Michael. When you were saying that, what I was envisioning was a rom-com where it's two guys going after the same gal, and the one guy is asserting himself, and she's like, he just doesn't get me. And the other guy says nothing the whole time.
Exactly.
And she's like doting on him to her friends, saying, he just totally gets me.
Yeah, right. Totally. The other thing is, my wife taught me, I sometimes I make this joke from a stage that always gets a good laugh. I go, hearing is a sense, and it's also a skill, right? And, it's like hearing is the sense, listening is the skill. And I was like, I know this because my wife teaches it to me frequently. She goes, Michael, I know you can hear me, but are you listening?
That is itself another book that you can write, and all of us would buy it, I'm sure. There's no question. So I love that this has been such great content already. But one thing that Kendley and I have spent a fair bit of time ourselves in the cohort session and on this TV show with other guests is talking about technology. I mean, you actually even mentioned AI technology built into Zoom right now. It's not going anywhere, right? The hockey stick will probably continue up. Yeah. So what do you see that could either be maybe disruptive even, or certainly beneficial to help sales organizations?
So I work with a lot of appointment-driven sales organizations, where they need to get appointments are kind of one of their major constraints. And so it's a wonderful thing because, 5 years ago, they started baking in automation features into pretty much every CRM, even a lot of free versions. And so now with AI, you can use both, automation. So you can create like an email sequence or a cadence. And then you can go to ChatGPT or whatever your, language AI, preference is. But you can say, I need, my industry is this. Here's my big value, right? Here's my USP or whatever it is. And I need to get appointments. So each email I'd like you to send out, the call to action is, let's make an appointment. Let's book a meeting. I want them to get, progressively more authoritative, or I want you to keep it real jovial and happy and whatever. And you can A/B test both of those things in a CRM. But really, you can automate the appointment confirmation process almost completely by leveraging technology that's largely free. And I think that's going to be a game changer as far as productivity, to the point where if you're not doing it now, somebody else who is, and they're probably eating your lunch as far as, getting FaceTime with people. So I think that's for the sales professionals out there. If you're not using automation and AI to help write those scripts, and you can always adjust them, but it is a game changer. And ChatGPT 4 just launched their image generator, so you can actually create custom images. I was playing with it for the sales leader roundtable. I'll send them to you after. But I mean, it's in 30 seconds you can have a custom image with their logo. You can have scripts from ChatGPT. You can load them into your CRM and have something that perpetuates appointments almost autonomously, over the course of the next, 6 weeks to 6 months. And then if it's not working, you can make very quick adjustments, and start optimizing. Because if you can double your appointments, right? What can you do? You can double your sales. So triple your appointments, triple your sales. So I think that's the killer app at this point, is combining automation, AI, scripts, and just leveraging that technology so you can spend your time in front of more people.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that, and a lot to cover in this sales journey type of topic. I want to take us down another pathway, Michael, before we make sure we don't run out of time today. But I want to get your opinion of the best strategy or the tactic to really get more effort of productivity out of your sales team. This is one of the questions that me and Jim face almost every day in the work that we do, and the people that ask us that very same question. So what's your opinion of that?
So I have one of my favorite kind of tactics is, this supervised prospecting sessions. So, everybody has their own limitations, right? And there's usually productivity is about outgoing communication, emails, phone calls, things of that nature. And, everyone starts off with a ton of enthusiasm and then it fades over time. They've done a bunch of research. And if you have somebody and you just say, look, this person's just going to supervise your efforts today. And they could be, a guy from downstairs, that works in engineering, but you just seat him in the same room that, your people are prospecting in, or seat him in the same Zoom session or whatever it is. And then everyone has this feeling that they're being observed, right? It's like the Hawthorne effect. And by doing that, everybody's behavior changes and you get a new degree of productivity from them. And then that becomes your new baseline, because you can say, like, if you did it once, then you can do it again. And that becomes the minimum. And then you work from there. But I think doing that something like quarterly helps kind of reset your expectations for your team, and it gives them the ability to see what they're capable of, when they're being observed.
Interesting. I love the plant. Like, just bring somebody up from a floor or two down, and just tell them to sit next to Joe while he's making his calls.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be because you're supposed. With your right CRMs, you're tracking all their progress anyway. The other thing that I think has kind of flipped too, and this is probably like 10 years ago, the experts, whoever the experts are, right? They were saying, don't even bother leaving voicemails, right? Just get the calls out, just make the calls. But now the stats are 60% of phone calls that are made are all automated, right? So people don't answer the phone anymore. And so they're all screening their calls based on the voicemails that you leave behind. And so having a good voicemail, even if it's pre-recorded, to save you time, can differentiate you as far as getting callbacks. And I think that's kind of the script kind of flipped.
It's something you said there, Michael, that I actually agree with that completely. I believe that calling is not dead, and that you have to add to the other work that you're doing. And I often tell sales teams, hey, it's okay that you don't actually reach your target that you're trying to, but if you can get their voicemail, you can differentiate yourself in 20 seconds, because that's all it needs to be. Frankly, I even say you don't even need to leave your phone number. It's probably nice to leave your name at the end, which I tell them, don't even start out with your name. Just tell them why you're calling.
Yeah.
Then say it's Kendley here. But I'll always say, follow that voicemail up with an email that says, hey, Bill, I just left you a voicemail.
Right.
And this is what's in that voicemail, and this is what I'm trying to do with you, right? And I call it humanizing the approach, because otherwise it's just an email, and an email is not very humanizing.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I recommend for sales professionals and anybody who's engaging in sales, like a lot of the small business owners I work with are the best salesperson at their company, and it's to think about sales as almost like as a mini marketer, right? Or micro marketing. In marketing, they call it impressions, right? And the idea is to create these positive impressions. And with sales, it takes about 10 contact attempts back and forth to actually make a sale, sometimes more. And I see a lot of sales professionals just kind of go through the process of hey, I'm just following up on the meeting that we had, or I want to inquire about the agreement I sent you. And they're not thinking about, well, how do I make a positive impression? How do I add value with every interaction? Because that's what creates that momentum that would result in a better relationship and a buying decision at the end. So it's, micro marketing. There's, the corollary is impressions are contact attempts, and vice versa.
So you mentioned sales people or team doing kind of micro marketing. This can be a quick answer, but this is something that it can be a sticking point too. Is cold calling dead?
No.
Okay.
Cold calling is not dead. I mean, there is nothing like getting voice to voice with somebody, especially if they're receptive. And you have to have your, they call it a curiosity hook. You have to have a good hook right in the beginning. So, and I always say, like, this is the hook is something that would trigger the prospect to say, how do you do that? Or can you tell me more about that? So if your hook doesn't get them to ask that question, then it's not a good hook, right? So if I get somebody on the phone, I say, hey, I work with sales professionals and business owners, and I help them double sales in 90 days, right? And if they go, well, how do you do it? Then I say, well, I'd love to show you. Let's schedule some time, right? Because that's one of the key factors that people miss out on is as soon as somebody says, well, tell me more about that, or how can you do that? You just give them all the information right away. And you didn't take into account that you haven't really solidified a window of time to do that. Yeah. So that when you get that question, how, or tell me more about that, the discipline is don't answer the question, confirm the appointment, right? Say, I'd love to show you. It's going to take about 45 minutes. Is now a good time, or can we schedule something? And then, schedule and confirm the appointment.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said before. The goal of the call is to get an appointment. So right. Get the appointment.
Yep.
The call just happens to be face-to-face instead of over the phone.
So one of the things that I teach is the 3 sales method. The first thing you sell is yourself, your credibility. So if you're from a well-known company, sometimes you're just saying, hey, I'm from, Verizon or Microsoft. But if not, then you have to, say, hey, I'm a founder of Sales Journey. And then you state who you serve, right? So in my case, it would be business owners, sales professionals, and entrepreneurs. And then you say your hook. So the idea is you go, okay, this person has credibility. He serves people like me. And then the hook is, wow, double sales in 90 days. Well, how the heck is he going to do that? Right. And then you seal the deal on the appointment. So the second sale is the appointments for time. And then if you get the time, then you can try to sell for your product or service.
Love it.
Yeah, I do too. I often see where salespeople want to jump. They get that little bit of positive reinforcement, and then they jump too far too fast. It's like, hey, slow down. Let me just go to the next step. Because you bought my hook, I start telling you everything about my business.
I call it throwing up on the customer.
Yeah. So what happens is now I don't really need the next step with you anymore, even though I really didn't listen that closely, right, in the beginning. So I loved how you help that. As we're getting a little bit tight on time, I want to throw this question into you. What is the future relationship between marketing, sales, and customer service? Because I know in most organizations, particularly when you start getting above the small entrepreneur, it starts becoming siloed or fragmented. There are different departments.
Yeah, well, so marketing is running into the beginning of the sales process, right? To the point where the sales professional is entering much later. Like I said earlier, people are going through their own discovery online. They're kind of doing some comparisons. they're weeding out some of the options. And usually when they start engaging with the company, it's towards that, I'm almost ready to make a decision. I just need to actually speak to a human being. So there's a lot less patience for long discovery sessions. They really want to know how to differentiate between the options that they've already figured out. And then ultimately too, there's a customer service component that, people don't necessarily appreciate, because it's something that happens after the sale, but really the experience, the customer experience that happens after the sale is going to be responsible for all the referrals that the company is going to receive. So unless that experience is, and the key word here from the marketing experts is delight, right? Everybody's trying to create a delightful customer experience. And if you guys all know this, that it's 10 times easier to get a referral from a happy customer than it is to get a brand new customer. It's also a lot less expensive from like a customer acquisition cost perspective. Yep. And so focusing on entering the buying process towards a later stage of the sales process, the prospect needs clear insight to make a decision, and they want to talk to an expert that can guide them, and then making sure they have that wonderful experience. So you can go back and say, who else can benefit from a conversation with me or my company, and then starting that kind of virtuous cycle. It's really the only way to keep it going. There's the scorched earth strategy is it's not effective anymore. The world's too interconnected.
Well, there are definitely some type A salespeople that would take up an entirely different session on realizing the very important relationship that marketing plays, and to your point, the customer service team to delight the client after the sale's been made. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah, well, maybe you can have me back sometime. We can jump into it.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking we're certainly going to have you back, because we could have dove in on any one of these sort of subtopics, for 30 minutes each, right? So,
yeah. And
I know
I can talk about this for days. So
and I know our audience also likes to have a little bit of meat on the bone every now and then, as they say. But Michael, as we get ready to close out this show, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how they can reach you if they want to learn more, or if they want to sort of pick your brain and get some of your insight? How could they go about that?
Yeah, so I put all my contact information right here, so you can just pause the video and you can reach out to me. I do corporate trainings. I do custom trainings. I have an operations management philosophy where I kind of identify constraints, and then we relieve constraints to help with sales productivity, ultimately increasing revenue. I do some personal coaching, but I have to kind of select you to make sure that I know I can add value and help you. So if that's of interest, I also have several online courses, and I'd be happy to help. Have a discovery session. If I can help you and add value to you in any way, I'm happy to do that.
Well, Michael, we certainly appreciate you being on our show today. And Jim, thank you for making the connection. I know you've
Absolutely.
gotten the chance to interact with him several times before.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And Michael, yes, thank you. It was wonderful to spend some time with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Kenley. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks for being here. Take care now.
Thank you.
Jim, I tell you, I just don't know. Sometimes I'm speechless about, I wrote a page of notes, and I'm the co-host. I'm actually learning as we go.
I know. What's the best part, right, Kenley, is that we're fortunate to be able to get great guests like Michael Tracy on to share what they've learned throughout their process, their personal journeys through sales. And even though we're in the space and our viewers and listeners are in the space, this is really great information, man. It's awesome.
It really is. And so that's going to close out our December show. This will be the last one for 2023. So we've had a good journey this year, haven't we?
Oh, we have. There's been so many great notes that have been provided this year. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Excellent. So that brings me to our next show, which will be in January. We typically always go on the first Monday of each month, but the first Monday of January is actually New Year's Day. So our audience, be on the lookout on our LinkedIn pages for our time. We believe it'll be on January the 2nd at 4 p.m. on that Tuesday, but we'll let you know in the coming months. But again, we want to thank you for being on our show today or listening in. And we just appreciate our audience so much.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for being here today.
Thank you for joining us today. You are now eligible to attend the peer-to-peer professional development network of the Sales Leader Roundtable. It is held on the fourth Wednesday of each month at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. For an invitation, email us at info@salesleaderroundtable.com or visit us at www.salesleaderroundtable.com. Our next show is scheduled for the first Monday of each month. We hope you will join us again.